Hi, my name is Rebecca Davis. I have two kids in the Wallingford Swarthmore School District, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about my career. I am a history professor, and I wanted to now tell you a little bit about why I became a history professor, what kind of training I had to do to become one, and what my job's like today. So the basic thing is that I loved learning about history. I loved taking history classes in high school. I became a history major in college and loved it. And I loved learning history, reading about it. I also really loved researching and writing it. I loved the research paper assignments when we got to go to libraries and learn as much as we could and then write a paper about it. So I decided after I graduated from college and after I worked for a couple years in other jobs that I really wanted to be a history professor, to have the chance to spend my career teaching and writing about US history, which is my particular area. So I applied to graduate programs. There are two kinds of graduate degrees in history. There's a master's degree, the MA degree, and there's the PhD. The MA is a 2-year program usually involving lots of coursework, and sometimes students write what's called a master's thesis at the end, which is a paper of about, let's say, 80 pages, answering a question about the past. It's an original piece of scholarship. And the PhD is usually anywhere from 5 to 8 or 9 years, and the result of that is you write a much longer paper. It's really closer to being a book. So I went to graduate school and I had 2 years of coursework, a year of taking qualifying exams where I had to show that I knew a whole lot of history and do an oral exam with some of the professors that I worked with. And then I came up with a plan for my dissertation. The nuts and bolts of what it means to be a history professor, what it means to study history in this way, is that we ask questions about the past for which we don't already know the answer. And then we take those questions and we go look for primary sources, evidence from the time or the context that we're studying to answer our question. So the question could be, what was it like to be an enslaved person who lived at Monticello when Thomas Jefferson was alive? The question could be, how important was religion to the reasons why people fought in the Civil War? It could be questions like, what motivated a lot of the people who got involved in the civil rights movement in the 1950s? Or what were some of the arguments that people involved in the movement got into and why? And really, it's wide open, the kinds of questions you can ask. And we answer those questions not with our personal opinion, not with guesses, but with the evidence from the primary sources we gather through our research. Primary sources can be documents, books, letters, journals. They can be works of art, political cartoons, newspaper articles, buildings, architecture, archaeology, artifacts. All of those things can be a primary source. So some of the things that I already knew I loved were writing about history, researching history, being in the classroom with other people learning about history. And so I wanted to be a university professor where I would be able to do all of those things. It is a very challenging career to get into, unfortunately, especially in the sense where you have job security. So I'm extremely fortunate that I got something called tenure. Tenure means that unless I do something really terrible, my university can't fire me. And the reason universities should have tenure and colleges should have tenure is that faculty then have something called academic freedom. We can write about, publish about topics where we believe the research is true. We can demonstrate why our research lines up and is trustworthy, even if the conclusion isn't something that the people who employ us like or agree with. So that pursuit of figuring out the truth about the past, even if it's a truth that makes us uncomfortable, is one of the things that I really appreciate about the work that I do. On a more practical level, I teach classes to both undergraduates and graduate students. I usually teach 2 classes each semester, fall and spring. And sometimes my department might ask me to teach a class on a particular topic, but most of the time I get to teach about what I want to teach about, so long as it still helps the department bring in students and gives students a good learning opportunity. So I love teaching. I teach huge lectures of 160 people. I teach seminars of 8 people. They're very different ways to teach, but I find both really rewarding. I've written a couple books. I'm working on a new one. I write articles for academic journals, book reviews. I sometimes write pieces that appear in newspapers that are not academic, but try to use what I've learned from all of my research to help people be more informed or look at things from a different angle. The other part of my job is something we call service, which means serving on committees that help the university run better, or that make conditions better for graduate students, or just help run the programs that we already have in place. The job of being a history professor is one that's not really bounded by a regular workday. And I definitely have many colleagues in the field who work really, really intense hours. There's always another book to read, and there's always one more thing you could do to prepare for your next day's class. I have tried really hard over the years to put boundaries on the time that I give to my work so that I make sure I have time for my family and for myself. But there's also, to do this work successfully, you need to be able to work on your own a lot. So when I research and write for my books and my articles, I'm doing that all independently. Some fields are more collaborative. You would work in teams if you're in a science lab, for example. That's not often the case for historians. We almost always do projects independently. The job then has these different aspects that require different skills. Doing the research and writing requires the ability to sit quietly for extended periods of time, reading and thinking and writing on your own. Teaching requires that we be able to get in front of big groups of people and ask questions and answer questions and help lead discussions, be a bit more extroverted. And then when we have our committee work, we need to be able to be collegial and respectful of our colleagues, of the people we work with. So there are many different aspects of the job. It's definitely one that every day I can learn about something new. And I also love that aspect of the job. No 2 days are the same. And I feel extremely fortunate to have the wonderful job that I have in a field that is difficult to find a job in these days.